Jessica Kleinschmidt joins us here with the Oakland Athletics back on A's Cast Live. Congratulations, back for another season. How are you?
I'm good. And I'm also very pro. You mentioned all these guys with these big degrees. I'm a community college dropout. So you're giving me some love here too.
We're allowed to hire people like you? You
Yeah.
didn't go to Princeton or Brown or
I
Penn or
maybe to use the facilities once, but no, I don't have any student debt. So there you go.
there you go. Yeah, it's interesting. You've been around the game for a long time, and I think you know what I'm talking about. We sit here and MLB Network, and everybody's like, "This game is so great, and everything's so fun, and these guys are magical. And look at their shoes, and everybody's painting their shoes, and everybody's wearing chains." This is a game that's really hard. It's a game built in failure, and a lot of people don't know this. MLB Network or Sirius XM or whoever, I always joke around. It's the crowd that everybody's so stoked and it's great. No, it's not. This is a game of depression, anxiety, and it's tough. And a lot of people don't know that. And our coaches and our managers, they're the ones that have to deal with it.
Yeah, and it's a good way to paint the picture of how these athletes are actually humans as well. And you know me, I love the pop culture aspect. I love the fashion of it and all of that. But you also have to even it out with the fact that they are playing a tough game. And I think about these cliches that the Tony Kemps of the world talk to you about of having a short-term memory. And that's really important because of the longevity of the season. And it's hard to find the balance of remaining true to the sport, being smart. You want to pay attention to some of those analytics, but at the end of the day, still knowing that you want to get to know the players as well. And you've seen all the transitions of the game over the years, Townie, and everything like that. And I'm glad you mentioned Bob Melvin, because as much of an old school mentality as he was, he embraced, the new rules, if you will, but he always made sure to make time for his players. And I'm glad that you had Johnny Gomes on here before, because I actually wrote an article on Gomes about Bo Mel, give me one of the best quotes of Bo Mel, saying, if you don't enjoy playing for him, you can just go home. And that's Gomes on Bo Mel. And I just heard him, he always wanted to play for the A's, not only with those white cleats and everything, but at the end of the day, playing for a guy like Bo Mel, saying, if Bo Mel is managing that team, the team is going to be in it. And that's beyond the A's, like you guys mentioned, the Padres and everything like that. Bob and the Kotses of the world, they respect the old school mentality, but they also want to embrace everything new that's happening and making sure the players are above all of it. And we saw what the A's did last year, and this time around, we kind of have our bearings in what to expect, and it's a good time to highlight some of these players. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, I know what you mean. It's hard to find the balance of making everybody happy while introducing new fans into the game, staying true to the old school ways. It's kind of interesting how the league is looking at the moment.
And you start looking at our players, as this is last year. It's hard to explain last year. This year is truly getting back to, it's the land of opportunity. If you're an A's camp, you got a shot. I mean, if you're still there right now, you've got a shot to get big league at bats, big league innings. And I know we're going to talk with you about how David Forst, and they've said, well, Nick Allen, yeah, he's one of the shortstops. I mean, we were thinking about it knowing that you were coming on, because what we like to do with everybody, folks, just to take you behind the curtain, is we like to say, whether it's Jessica or Johnny, what are you hot on? What do you want to talk about? What are you interested in? And I know you're interested in this. And we were like, if there's anybody that, like, right now that we could guarantee anything to, there's like really only one guy. And I think it's like, I can guarantee Seth Brown's going to be playing, whether it's outfielder. For everybody else, Jessica, it's kind of like, man, you got to earn your stripes.
I'm glad I don't have to come up with the roster speculation articles anymore in my career, because with this, that's a tough decision to make. And you mentioned Nick Allen. Defensively, I would want him on any team I was ever a part of. I love his defensive game, his range alone. You forget that he's not the tallest guy in the world. It's all going to go down to his offensive productivity or lack thereof. I think he just barely made it over 200 as far as his averages went last season. And you think of a guy like Aledmus Diaz, who can play the left side of the field really well defensively, but he does have one leg up on Nick in that there are the offensive production. And not even that, but no offense to Nick, but he was just a rookie last year and he did such a good job. The maturation process, you wouldn't even think about it. But I think he needs to concentrate on the hitting. And it kind of reminds me of, you guys remember Sean Murphy? It was very back and forth. One year he was very defensive heavy, the best play caller in the game. And then his offensive capability slipped and it was kind of back and forth. And last year we kind of saw the well-rounded Sean Murphy. And I'm hoping we can get to that with Nick Allen. But that's why they went out and got a guy like Aledmus Diaz, calling him the day after the World Series win for the Astros. And you got the Jace Peterson deal as well. And Tony Kemp's always going to be in the mix and all of that. And now that we know that Seth Brown's going to take more reps in the outfield because of Aguilar, those things somewhat are setting the stage for what we're going to do. And not to mention, Nick gets to learn from some of these guys as well. And he was able to do that with these older veterans in the past with Elvis Andrus and everything like that. But you mentioned the season of opportunity. He had that last year. Now he kind of knows what he needs to work on. And that's why you have those resources there and all of that. So that's ultimately why we went out, not just to keep up with the fact that Pinder was no longer on the team. We need a utility guy to come off the bench, and that could be Diaz's role as well. So that's what it comes down to, is if he gets the bat going, that guy's going to be a superstar. And that doesn't, we all know that. I talked to Todd Frazier about him. Todd and Nick were on the same USA team together, and Todd said, as a veteran himself, he was learning from Nick Allen. So what's that telling you? Just how much potential he has and the maturation process where he wasn't playing like a rookie. And these battles ultimately make the player better. That's what makes it awesome for them. They love the competition at the end of the day. So it'll be interesting to see what shakes up. But I am glad that Force was open with, hey, he's only penciled in right now. We don't know what's going to happen at the end of the day. And that goes to show that these decisions aren't easy to make.
Well, and I think about where we are now, where shifting is going away, that we could sit there and look so much at offensive numbers, but we're kind of going to get back into a game to where the guys up the middle got to cover a lot of ground. They've got to make a lot of plays to help out their pitching staffs. If you think about going back to kind of an older school mentality, we didn't always really care what shortstop, second base, and center fielders hit. We need them to cover ground, and we need them, more importantly, the runs that they produce offensively, we need them to prevent runs defensively, and that's where the big value is. So for Nick Allen, we're going to be looking at the offense a lot, but wouldn't you say with the lack of shifting, his importance at defense just skyrockets?
Absolutely. And I'm a sucker for a defensive play as well. However, I was thinking of, we talked to Buster Posey a few years back when these rumors of the defensive shift were going to be taken away, and he had Brandon Crawford up the middle for him. And he thought about all the amazing diving plays that Brandon Crawford could make, not to mention helping him out as a hitter with some of these base hits. I still think that you can bolster up your defensive game. You still have to hit at the end of the day. And we can blame the Derek Jeters of the world for that, because not too long ago, Chris, these shortstops didn't have to have a ton of offensive production. Now you have these amazing Carlos Correa deals being handed out, Trey Turners and everything like that. They do have to have offensive production. So sure, you want to have that, but it can't take away from everything going on at the plate. But like you said, I will never stop thinking about the range that Nick Allen can cover and all of that. But it kind of goes to show everything that, and not to mention, we've seen how you have Brad Osmus working with the infield last season, and they learned a lot from that as well. But I'm excited to see what they do with that. That means more defensive gems on our end that we can geek out over, and then maybe Nick Allen can not worry about that. He's great at that. He's wonderful. So let's concentrate on the offense, give us both the web gem and then hopefully something at the plate.
So you're going to be doing all kinds of multimedia stuff. You're writing, you're going to be on social media, you're going to be on our show, which was big last year. The fact that Mark Kotze always talks while we're on the air. So if he says something big, I mean, we can see him, but we don't know what he's saying. How you can rush over real quick and say, hey, this is what's going on. That's definitely big for us here on A's Cast Live. And I know you've done a piece on, the pitch timer, not from the aspect of the hitters and the pitchers, enough of them, more about us as broadcasters. less time to tell our beautiful stories. It's one of the great things about listening and watching games, or the stories. They can be about the actual game. I mean, sometimes random stories are hilarious, but you know what? Just like the pitchers and the hitters, broadcasters got to speed it up.
Yeah, and you remember I called last season. I was in the middle of my Reno Aces broadcast, and
Yeah.
I was introduced to the pitch clock very quickly. And I thought about it because you guys know very, very much so, I love to talk. And when I'm sitting next to Zach Bayrudy, I had to get through these conversations and these stories rather quickly, or I couldn't touch them at all. So that's why I wanted to dig deep in it. And I was luckily able to find a well-rounded balance of Dallas Braden, of course, a former pitcher turned broadcaster, and he can tell a beautiful story. Robert Ford, Astros radio guy, Melanie Newman, who was actually introduced to this pitch clock back in the AFL in 2015. So she had an opposite view. And then Danny Wexelman, who's done it all as well. You want to talk a multimedia superstar. So to get their I guess views of it all was really interesting because Dallas concentrated on the hitters and how there's actually a game within the game, because his mentality was, if I were a pitcher dealing with this, how would I manipulate some of the scenarios? Because you saw what Max Scherzer is doing, try and take advantage of that as well. And Melanie Newman's very much a fan of the game as well, and being able to remind you that the game's going to go by faster. You're going to be able to pay attention a lot more. And at the end of the day, you've talked about it, Townie. You have kids at home. I know sometimes it can be a late game that you're getting out, and then the next thing you know, it's super late at night and you can't tuck your kids into bed, or you don't have anything like that. And that was interesting to come about as well. And I thought Robert Ford was an old school guy, and he was very much embracing it as well. So it was good to get their point of views. And I think it's important for them to send a message to the fans as well, because a lot of the fans were apprehensive when this new technology was introduced. But at the end of the day, it's going to happen. You have to deal with it. Madison Bumgarner is embracing it. He said of all the changes over his last 15 years, that's probably one of his favorites. Madison Bumgarner is traditional. He's old school, curmudgeonese in certain aspects, and he was able to embrace it. So if you have a guy like that is willing to be more opened up to it, not like he has a choice, that's something to think about as well. So I got all of their input, and ended up being a really fun article to write. And I think it was very important to have different avenues of it as well, because like you said, of course the players were going to be asked about it. Of course the hitters were going to be asked about it, and especially the pitchers. But I had to rush through a lot of my segments. There was no way that I was alone in that. And at the end of the day, we have to make adjustments too on the broadcast, just as the players are as well. So it was good to see their input.
Two things on that. And you mentioned like my kids, like trying to, and I wouldn't do it. I knew the answer to it, but trying to tell my wife, remember, we started, first pitch used to be 7:07.
Yeah.
The average game, 3 hours and 4 minutes. So the game's not ending till 11 at night on average. And we're talking Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If it's not
and
a
your
game,
kids were younger too.
yeah, taking my kid. My kids are not going to get home and go to bed till 11 o'clock. They got to get up and go. Like it just didn't make sense. So now that we basically tee off here at 6:40 and we're going to be done well under 3 hours, it makes it easier. Whether you just want to come to the game, you want to bring your kids to the game, you can get home, get a good night's sleep. Kids can go to school, people can go to work, not be dragging. It's just better for everybody. And my question, dating back to when last year, we talked a lot about when you were doing the color up there in Reno. Did you, when you were telling a story, did you watch the clock while you were telling the story? Because obviously you got a clock, you got a pitcher, when he's going to deliver it. So were you watching the clock, the pitcher, when you're doing the story, doing, I got to speed up, or I got some time, or I got to speed up, I got to get it done? Were you watching that?
That's a good question, and I didn't, only because at the beginning I wasn't used to it. And on top of it, Townie, we had robo umps as well, so that made the game a totally different element as well.
Robo, yeah.
We had the robo ump, which I disliked a lot because I really wanted to see a player get ejected and all of that. That's a whole nother story. But I kept forgetting about the pitch clock because I wasn't used to it after all the years. And once I did start to notice that, I was already adjusted to the pace. So And I just, knowing me, if I see a timer that's counting me down, it's going to stress me out. So I had Bay Rudy, who's just a phenomenal professional in that. And he would guide me a little bit and remind me. First couple games was an S show. I could not get through any of the stories. Mind you, we were playing the Vegas team, which was our AAA team. So I knew all the guys, and I had so many stories that I couldn't touch on. And that was something that was difficult to get through. But I can promise you, it's next thing you know, it was very quickly. And in Reno, that's where my family is. So they weren't annoyed watching me through a 3.5 hour, 4 hour broadcast. They got to go home with my young niece and nephew and not have them complain about it all. And that was a big indication of they were excited too. My brother himself, who's a huge baseball nerd, said he was so much more in tune with the game than any other game he had witnessed. And just me as a baseball girl myself, I remember a lot of those quick pitcher duels a lot more, or except for those 16 inning games when you're stuck in San Francisco covering the Giants. Those happen every now and then. Those ones I remember, but the ones I will never forget are the ones that are going back and forth where I'm super in tune. The next thing you do, you look down at your scorebook and you're in the 4th inning, but it doesn't take anything away from the game at all. Matt Carpenter, we took forever during his at bats. He was in AAA when this was implemented. He adjusted just fine and he loved it too. And that guy's been in the game forever. So our thing was, the fans love it. The broadcasters adjusted really quickly. So overall, seems like everybody's happy.
Well, I tell you, getting ready for this show today and basically going all over the Arizona Diamondbacks and reading about a couple of these guys that they got, this Nelson and Jameson, guys who got great stuff, but just dreaded. And you never would have thought, and it happens to us with the Aviators, you never would have thought going to AAA, you were going to dread it. Normally that was the next step to the big leagues. Oh my God, I'm in AAA. If I'm a pitcher, I mean, Reno, I don't know what the elevation is, but I can tell you right now, they have a boatload of snow, and I've played golf in Reno, and the ball flies forever. I can't imagine pitching in Vegas. I can't imagine pitching in Reno. It's got to be miserable. You don't get the same type of spin on your breaking balls. A guy hits it, it flies like a jumpy ball. I feel bad for these AAA guys because the toughest thing is for evaluators, there's no way hitters are that good, and there's no way pitchers are that bad.
And I'm glad you brought that up because it's the PCL dread, right? A hitter's haven is there. And I've talked to so many pitchers post game, and it's one of the most annoying conversations ever, especially when you're talking to a hitter after the game as well. Dallas Keuchel comes to mind. He once told me he thinks his ERA is somewhere in the 10 range at that ballpark in Reno. And they say it's worse than if you were at Coors Field, if you will. But they will say, though, the PCL definition of all of that has, I want to say, been watered down a little bit more. And if anything, it works as, more of an incentive when they get their call up and all of that. But I will say, having to talk to a pitcher after a game like that is never fun, but it's no different. You give more props to the guys that were there, like a guy in a Rockies uniform who's pitching at Coors constantly, a 4 ERA. Is that really a 4 ERA or what's going on there? So that's always something as well. But the ball flies, which obviously helps the game as well from there. And I never really watched that many games in Vegas, but same thing at the PCL. There's another ballpark in Colorado Springs and everything like that. And then New Mexico's in Texas. So all these hot spots and everything like that. That's why people love Chase Field. Stephen Piscotty thrives at Chase Field because of that reason. And he has the batter's eye. He said something along those lines as well. So it's always fun to cover a game there.
Well, Reno's just always scared me. It's the biggest little city in the world. It scares me.
Yeah, if you tell me about it. I was raised here. You say one thing and everybody knows. It really is a small town.
I love Reno. We now do our guys trip every year. I love the El Dorado. Downtown Reno's awesome. The El Dorado is my spot. So we'll hang out in the El Dorado. We'll be in the sports book at the Silver Legacy. You got the ballpark right there. The Bowling Hall of Fame is there. Roberto's is there. Taco shop, which is fabulous. I'm a big Reno guy. And the greatest thing about Reno is that from the time the plane takes off San Jose to it lands in Reno, it's like 28 minutes. You literally can leave the Bay Area, be on the ground and in a casino in 45 minutes.
Yeah, and Oakland, I think, is only a 40-minute flight. I've done that flight quite a few times, and especially because I live right in Oakland. But yeah, and there's a Reno pitcher on the A's right now in Joe Wieland, and him and I both made All-Stars at the same time for
What?
2 different little leagues.
Were you better than him?
No, absolutely not. He played on the same team as Tony Thompson. If you are a huge A's prospect nerd, he was on
It's
that
okay.
team.
You can say you were better than him.
I don't know. He was on the team that had like Luke Babbitt. You know what I mean? Like he had actual athletes on the team.
You were a player back in the day.
I was so damn good, Townie. I could still throw. And I was still
you may have been better than him.
Probably, I mean, maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe him and I will throw a bullpen. I already told Emo about it. Emo wants to see a bullpen out of me to see if I still got it. So that's good. But the thing that was interesting is I'm still to this day the only woman to make 11-12 All-Stars for that little league. And it was the same time that Wieland made it for a different little league in like the more fancy schmancy part of Reno, which does exist. But
one of those guys.
One of those guys, yeah. And then Kotze's lived in Reno at one point. So there's some Reno ties on that A's team.
Yeah, and then you throw me in there. I've done a lot of dumb things in Reno. I could be a part of that.
Yes, exactly. I think we've all kind of done dumb things in Reno. I probably did dumb things in Reno before you ever did, Townie.
I've made some bad decisions in Reno.
Heard that many of times.
Well, it is great to have you back. I can't wait to see you during the season. I'm sure you're going to be back on A's Cast Live before we start this thing, right?
Hope so.
All right. Well, you let me know. Great to see you. You be well, my friend.
Thanks, guys.